The first thing you want to do is verify that what you got coming out of the bins is the same left and right. And well, to do a boom certification, what you do is actually you put the booms down. There's a kit you buy, and there's a sock that goes over each one of the deflectors into a pail, and you weigh what comes off. One of the first things, or the process would be, number one, you determine that left and right are equal. And as long as the gates are the same, they have to be, theoretically anyway. If they're not the same, something's wrong with your PWMs, right? The PWMs should be able to read on each side that those chains, or force those chains to run exactly the same. If they're out, there's something wrong with the PWM, and there's also something wrong with your alarms. You don't have them set right. You can set the alarms so that you're within 3 to 5%. That's when I find 3 a little tight sometimes. I usually set them for 5% from side to side, because it does change, it walks a little bit. But if you have them set for a 5% difference, the two sides should never be out more than 5%, right? If they are, there's something wrong. And I'll show you the PWMs here later. Anyway, so get the two sides equal. Then there's an Excel table that you can download off the website that you put all your weights into, and then it'll start telling you what to do. So the next part of the process, you make sure your left and right are the same. Next is that you make sure each pipe is the same. So each one of these is for one pipe, okay? And that's what that threaded rod's about. We actually tune it at factory. We're within 3 to 5%. Once again, now each pipe is exactly the same. So what you'll do is the measurement, what the computer's doing, is on each one of these pipes, there's 2 outlets, right? There's the inner outlet and then the outer outlet. It'll take the weight of the 2 outlets and compare it to the 2 next to it, et cetera, et cetera. And it will tell you how far to push and pull on that particular threaded rod to get it where it should be. So I always tell customers, when you handle those things, they're not going to melt, but they're not wheel chocks either, right? Like, don't be throwing them into the back of the pickup truck and all that, because that really does make a difference. It's not very much on there to tune it, right? I have seen enough volume come through these that they actually start to wear here as well. That's a lot of volume, but I have seen it. The other thing that I've seen that probably is more effective or changed what happens here is they plug them, and they plug them bad where they don't really notice. So normally what happens is if you plug a boom, what's supposed to happen is a material drop, and it'll actually run down the front side of the funnel, and it'll run over the front of the machine, and you'll see a streak out behind you. I have seen it where they're going so fast that they actually kind of override that, and the chains don't stop. They keep piling it in, right? And either you're eventually going to blow those rubbers off. It takes a lot to do that, and what'll happen is they'll bow that thing right out. And I've seen it where they have them bowed right out, and then the thing can't measure for each pipe at all. And can I rebend that? No, sorry. No, that thing is now junk. It's that simple. Once you bow one of these, they're done, so you need to replace them. It's, something that people would want to watch and pay attention. It really depends on the operator. So back to where we were here. Back to the gates. If you have to adjust the gates, they're fairly finicky, so it's rare you ever have to touch them. But if you do, it is what it is. Go to the book and find out what the gate height is, because there is differences between the years. And it's measured from the floor, not the chain. So always remember, measure from the floor up. And we actually have a special tool that just fits over top of the chain and drops in, and then we lower the gate to it. If you were doing it, you might just borrow that or something anyway. Here we have that bearing on the new style, the 25s. The old ones, like I said, are a pin, and they go through the center of that roller with a brass bushing. The original ones where the brass bushing was smooth, and I want to say 22 or 23, we went for a spiral in it. And the spiral's a whole lot better because it forces the grease down it. I certainly have had these things seized, and it's so shiny you can't see it. You just, like, guys don't know they're seized, right? So it is something to look for if you're getting high working pressures on that. That's one of the first places to look, is because it's dragging, right? So what you do is you just mark it with a marking pencil, and then just kind of watch it, type of thing. If they are seized, generally by the time you find it, that idler drum is scored bad, throw away. Always, 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 always replace the idler drum and the pin that goes in it together. Get a new pin as well, because the old pins were drawn over mandrel. The new ones are actually machined, so the tolerances are significantly better than the original ones. So those are ones. The original ones had 100-hour grease intervals. 40. I'd like those ones daily. Actually, I have no problem with daily. That one I want greased every day, and the top pivot one as well, where the strut arm swings out on. And those ones, because of that strut arm ever seizes up on there, it doesn't tighten up. It just doesn't swing all the way. And then when it does that, you're getting the wrong height on stuff. So anyway, so those ones definitely get more grease. If you look on the inside of the tubes there, you can see the Venturi. So, it's a small hole, no different than a power washer, right? So what we're doing is we're pressurizing the air on the inside, right in here, and then driving it out through those Venturis to give the air its force. And you can feel them if you put your finger in there. You can actually feel the Venturis as well, right there. Over time, they will wear. I've not had to replace any yet, but I know that day's coming, and they are designed and built to be able to be replaced. Be aware that there's 3 different sizes on here of Venturis. They're not all the same size. And the logic on that is that we need different amounts of air pressure depending on the length of pipe. And actually, I still can't get my head around it, but the pressure inside that airbox is not equal. Across the airbox, the one corner and the other corner are not the same. I don't know why, but I know it is the case. So we've tuned the Venturis so that they get the right amount of air for it to come out. So what the fan does is creates, high pressure area there, blows it through the Venturi. Material comes off the chain, drops down through those dividers and into the funnel. And actually, it creates a low pressure area where it comes out of the Venturi. So it's actually sucking the material into the airstream as well. And if you'll notice on the bottom here, there's little cutouts. And what those cutouts do is actually pulls more air in. So it actually sucks air in right at that point to help it come down through. So it's actually got suction. You want to keep those things clean. If you don't, you'll lose 10%, 15% of your capacity. So anyway, it'll pull down there, shoots it across. When the boom is down, you'll notice that these are not round, that they're oval, I guess you could, well, they're not really oval, they're elongated. The reason for that is they fit over top of the airbox like this, and they have to be able to rotate, right? So you have to have enough room for them to be able to rotate. And they can rotate a long way. You can touch the ground if you want on the handle, or when it's all the way up, you can walk underneath it. So it's got a big spread, so it needs to be able to have lots of movement on there. So just be aware that I personally either put a water hose or air on that probably daily, and especially if they're running in more humid conditions, just to make sure you got lots of air coming in through it all over the place. The airbox itself has that right here. There's a panel under there that you can flip open, right there, to be able to get inside to service the airbox. You'll also notice if you look in the Venturis here, that one's open, that one's open. These 3 are blocked, kinda. There's actually an angle iron inside the airbox, and it changes the airflow in there. Exactly how it works, I don't know. I haven't figured it out. I do know we've had guys that went, those not very smart, them engineers, they're slowing down the air by putting that stupid angle iron in, and take the angle iron out, I'll guarantee you the thing will plug. Guarantee. So, anyway, it's interesting. It's black magic type of thing. But anyway, where I was going with that, if you get gunk inside the airbox, it'll do some really weird things. So if you've got a customer that's complaining it was working fine 3 days ago, and now I'm plugging all the time, did the material change? What changed, right? The material changed, did the speed change, did something change? It also could be that if they've plugged it, they've managed to get material back into the airbox, which I don't know how it does it. Once again, in theory, it shouldn't be able to do it, but I certainly have seen it, where there's gunk in there. Open her up, put the hose in it or the air wand, and away you go again. So it makes a big difference. So air boxes need to be cleaned, all that sort of stuff. You can adjust them as well. There's these to match it up to the boom when the boom is down. We do that at factories. Very rare you have to touch that. If, for whatever reason, they dent one of these things, and I have seen that, they go back into a poly block back there. So there's a couple of bolts right here that hold it. You can loosen those off, and actually there's a ring clamp here. You loosen it off, you can pull them out. And you can shorten them a little bit. If they go back into the block about that far, you can just trim a little bit off. Don't let them run with a nick or a ding or a twist up, because it just does really, really weird things to the airflow. These pipes are cheap to replace if you ever have to replace them too, but you can tune them, pull them out, fix them. I never did finish my thought on the bagging. On the boom there, the inside one, there's actually a tongue that goes back on the inside, and you can bend the tongue this way or that to get 50% of the material off of there when you bag test. So first thing you do is make sure the two sides are equal, then you make sure that each pipe is exactly the same, and then you make sure that you got a 50-50 split. When you do a boom cal, find out what the average of what they do is. So as an example, my average amount is 350 pounds at 12 miles an hour, 14 miles or whatever. Set the computer to do that. But if it's 800, then you need to do that too, because how the material goes down that pipe changes with volume. So you want to be kind of somewhere in the neighborhood of what they normally are doing. Speaking of that, the deflectors, you will notice the new ones, and this one being a 24.5, the 25s have a slot here to make this easier to bend. And once again, when you have it unfolded, just put your eye down it, make sure they're all the same. It's not that fussy. The reason we started doing that was the Case 810s all had that, and Case really went out of their way to make these things all exact. But we're on 30-inch centers here. They're double that. So how it goes off those deflectors was really important with them. It's not quite as important here because we have double overlap, basically. If you ever have to service the gearbox, there's this bolt holds the gearbox on, right? There's the fill level plug right here. You see that? Underneath the fill level plug, there is an Allen screw or an Allen headed bolt. You got to reach in there and pull it back out. Otherwise, that ties the gearbox onto the shaft and places it on the right spot on the shaft. So make sure to take that out or she's not coming. To do the seal on the outside is pretty easy. Just take it off, seal ripper, pull it out, put it in. The seal where it sits on the shaft, there's a slight step that the seal has to go on. So if you ever push it back in, I get right till I can almost feel where the step is. Just lift it a bit, do a wiggle squiggle so that you don't damage the seal on the way in. These, in theory, you can rebuild these boxes. They're in the parts book. Don't do it. Don't do it. They're actually not that difficult. They're, mechanically, they are what they are. The sensor up top there, so the 67 tooth sensor, it's kind of delicate. It reads, if it's out by a whole much more than 1.5 millimeters, it gets erratic. So the deck is there where it fits in is perfect, right? When you rebuild the gearboxes, I give you a 50-50 that you get that gap right, just because of how the bearings and everything fits. So it's not worth the trouble. Next, these ones, the motors on these are theoretically rebuildable too. There's a seal kit for these. Don't do it. The seal kit is half the price of the motor, and then you put labor in it. If you're paying for a new motor, you might as well have a new motor. So those ones don't bother. The ones on the fan, and I don't know. I don't know if we've had 2 or 3 of those ever go bad. They're worth rebuilding. But these ones, nah, don't bother. That sensor up there, that's something everybody should have. You're dead in the water without it. So, and when you put them on, they used to at factory put just a little bit of RTV on the bottom and put them down. They're not doing that anymore. What they're doing is actually placing them on and then putting the RTV around the outside, like right on the edge here.
All work goes into that.
Yeah, just to keep yeah. And I think that's a better solution because we were seeing some erratic. Just that little bit of film was enough to yeah. If you get an error reading on those, it could be the sensor. The easiest way to figure that is just do swap gnostics. As likely is the pin out on it. So where it pins out here, those 3 pins, I've certainly seen them get wiggly and wobbly, and they just don't make 100% contact all the time. So that I would look for right away. In the new service manuals, Simon's really gone out of his way. He's got pinouts on pretty much all the connections now, which is really nice. So you get into like a big connection where you got 16 pinouts or something on it, you don't have to be guessing about what you're playing with. So that's a really nice, and that's in the new service manuals. We put heat shrink on everything, and I know you'll curse us when you're cutting that off, and you'll go, why did they do that, make it so hard? It does allow you to have a hex there to actually put a wrench on versus the 2 vice grips, because it's rotted, right? And the big thing is that where the hose crimps go onto the hose, where the knurls are, they'll start sweating a year later because the metal's thinner right there, and they'll just slobber. So it's a lot neater and cleaner. I always put it back on when I do it. Back to the seal. If you have a guy who's got a seal that's weeping here and they're worried about it, but they got to finish the season, just put corn head grease in it instead of oil. Corn head grease has enough lubricity to keep everything together till you can do the fall service on it. If a guy's overloaded the chains, this thing tends to bend just a little bit. So if you take a look at these and they're not 100%, don't let it bother you a whole lot. What happens is they kind of twist just a little bit and then they sit where they sit and they'll never twist again. But if you're looking for it, and most of them have just a slight crank on them, just be aware of it. It's not a big deal. If they got a big crank on them, then something went wrong because the relief should have let go by then. All right. We were talking about sensors on the fold. So here is the main sensor right here, and there used to be one on that main pivot up there. This one does not have one, or should not have one. Let's just double check. It does not. There used to be one right on that hinge pin right there. So the older ones, 24 and older, will have one up there as well. And that's the one I was talking about, tended to give us grief. And in theory, you can get rid of it. Quiz Simon about that. When that thing failed, it would go into what was called limp mode. And it drove people just over the edge because in limp mode, you had to hold the button for 30 seconds to get anything to happen. So they'd sit there and they go, dun, 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 and by then they're starting to go, come on, come on. And then something would happen, and it would start to fold out and start to do its thing, and then they go, oh, and then they take the finger off the button. Yeah, and then they go, ah, and it would just drive them around the edge, right? And so I don't know how many calls we got over that. It was one of those things that was a very good learning lesson for all of us. Anyway, the new 08 software, you don't even know it's in limp. So it's almost right away. It does a recal every time. Simon will go through all it. It's just, the amount of phone calls we take on it now are almost zero. It just does what it's supposed to do. And the call that I get is, how come it doesn't cradle up? So what happens is normally when you, in normal sequence, and yours actually did that, it didn't drop down into the cradle. Yeah, so you're in limp mode. Yeah. That told me right there you're in limp mode. So if we get it out of limp, it should sit down. And that's what guys phone and go, how come I can't cradle it up? It doesn't sit down. Oh, you're in limp mode. They don't even know it's in limp mode. So, and it's like, you want us to come fix that? Nah, not today. Yeah. Yeah. We're busy today. Come some rainy day type of thing. So that's a significantly better. Yeah, Simon will walk you through all that. Any machine that doesn't have the 08 software, put the 08 software on it. It's definitely 100% better than the old one. So there was a couple of different auto booms that were available on it. This is an ORAC. I'm not as familiar with that. On the 200s, everybody asks, auto boom? No, you can't. And you can't because it doesn't have enough hydraulic capacity fast enough. You need a certain amount of hydraulic capacity to make all that thing work at the right speed. And the 600s just don't have enough volume to do that. These ones do, obviously, because of the pumps. So anyway, on the cradle system, you will also notice that this pin here is supposed to sit down in here. The lock comes across. There's a little teensy weensy bolt there on the lock. See that one right there? That is to keep that lock in place. I've seen them break those ones. If they, in theory, they shouldn't be able to, but if they try and make it go, that will give up. So that bolt will shear before you bend stuff. The real part where I've seen them damage them is they're going down the road and they go through the monster pothole and it does that. And you get that boom jump and the boom kind of jumps up there, and instead of bending stuff, once again, it'll shear that off. That one is, that one might be the bigger one. There was I can't remember the dimensions. We actually went up a bolt size. If you have somebody who's breaking those regularly, just go up a bolt size so that they're not doing it quite as much. This is the breakaway section right here. And you'd set it so that just takes a reasonable push to make it snap. And so to set the amount of pressure that you need for the snap, you set this spring right here, tighten her up for more snap, less. I have seen them damage this neoprene roller on here. If that neoprene roller's not there, then the thing kind of flops around a little bit. You want it so that this piece here snaps over top and keeps it pretty tight, right? Okay. The ski, of course, what it's designed to do is that if you touch down, the ski is actually on the mid boom versus the breakaway. So if you got it into an edge and you hit the ground over here, this should break away, right? If you if you hit on mid boom, what we're trying to do is take some of that shock out of it. You know it's spring when. Anyway, these things really do make a difference on boom longevity. Some of the really old ones didn't have that. If they don't, make sure that they get that. That's an update kit we'll look after. They gotta have that part on it, that ski, right? Okay. And over here, this is really important over here. So this is the breakaway, the bolt shear pin breakaway for the mid boom. Right, so we got a breakaway on the other part with the spring. You drive it in the ground, it breaks back, snaps, away you go, into the post tree, whatever. If you touch down on the mid boom here, that ski should take it up. And what it's doing is taking some of that force so that we don't put the force directly through. If the force still is enough, what it'll do is the shear bolt here will let go. Here's the pivot bolt, here's the shear bolts, here's the shear bolt. Sometimes guys break those and they don't realize they've done it. And what'll happen is it'll fold and you'll watch it and it'll snap. It's kind of limp in there. It's not really smooth. If they let that thing run with a broken shear bolt, you can operate, but you will damage stuff over time. That's one of those ones that you're going to do. You're going to rip this thing apart or you're going to rip this thing apart. It's not going to like it from that thing doing this all the time, right? So as part of the daily walkarounds, the things that you look for are, I want that top thing greased there. I want those drums on the back greased. I want that to be looked, and the chain tension as you walk around, that's kind of a daily. That thing is every day. When you walk by that thing gets looked at. There's a reason that we put spare bolts here, because it's, well, I don't have a bolt. No, yeah, you better have a bolt. And you should have the wrench with you too. If you have an older one that does not have that thing on it, we have an update kit to put that on. So everyone should have that on. So some of the older ones were slightly different. It was called, I called it a banana thing here, where instead of this, it was two plates that went together. And the theory was there was two bolts in there that would shear and then you would just replace the bolts. The reality was that the bolts sheared, but then the banana plates went like this and you could never get them back together. And you're out there with a hammer tapping them in the vice grips and it never worked. Anyway, if you have one of those older ones, that is part of the kit to upgrade. It's this part here and that ski as all part of that same kit. Make sure they get them. So that's any 80 and 90. So the 80s we didn't do originally. I like it on the 80s too. I think it's well worth putting on the 80s, and I don't know exactly what the deal on them is. The 90s, I know we look after it. The 80s, I can't tell you, but it should have it on anyway. It just makes the booms last so much better. So when, if they ever touch down, worst you're going to do is blow out a bolt versus fold a bunch of stuff. Once again, so that if you ever touch it down or you touch down, that force that comes through is basically coming through here. So there's two forces that'll happen. They'll either touch down with it or that other one that I talked about, that really big snap, and just made these things last so much better. When it folds, you'll want it so that it cradles onto those rubbers there. As you can see, they can all adjust as well. And the strut, there is a lock on it and all that sort of stuff. If you have to work on the strut, do not over tighten these bolts. They're almost like a little U-joint. They have to be able to move, okay? You want them tight enough that they're there, not so tight that they don't move. So when this thing all folds, it needs to be able to, all right? This one right here, we haven't had a lot of issues with them, but you do have to kind of put them in the right spot. So there's a special tool to do that. That special tool also sets the sensor for the fan. I would highly recommend you get one of those little tools. They're like a plastic printout thing. They really make a difference, especially if you ever shell out a fan RPM sensor. Those things, I think the book says 1/8 inch. Yeah, it's. That's too much or too big? No, you need every bit of 1/8 inch. Yeah, I think originally it was 16th, and we had issues with them touching. Yeah. And it is the same pressure sensor on that one too. So okay. So when you fold, the process is it has to come all the way up first, and it won't fold any further unless if it doesn't do that. So that cylinder closes, pressure sensor triggers, that lets the next part of it go, which is the elbows. And when that goes, then it sets off the next pressure sensor that lets that thing do its fold and come back in. Yeah. This is where the computers live. So the ICANN computer, in this case the RC, no, this one should be a BAC. It's an RC. I am wrong. There you go. And then the auto boom is all in there. That's the classic thing. Do not power wash that, please. And we were talking earlier about the handle for the single bin, dual bin. There you go, right there. So you go to the catwalk, just click it one way or the other, and you can see where it goes. See that? Actually, somebody want to jump up there and just push it? That middle bin now is, let me see here with that handle. It's dumping into bin 2. So that makes it 50-50 versus the other way was 60-40, where it was going back into bin 1. So on this side of the machine is all the hydraulics for the bed chains, and on the opposite side of the machine are all the hydraulics for the boom fold. So once again, there's your calibration trays right there. You know, with the funnel out, what you do is, well, let's do it. This one could have used a design revamp, but anyway. There you go. See the two little hooks on there? Everybody come take a look. Oh, it just hooks onto the bottom there. And then you hang your pail in these slots here. And if you're doing a pail, like a standard 5-gallon pail, ask it for 50 pounds. Because most product, the most you'll get into a pail is about 30. So if you ask 25, you got kind of just the right amount.
Is that accurate enough, you think? That's just the pail, or is it better with a loader or something?
The bigger the volume, obviously, the better off it is. Yeah. It depends on the operator, and it depends who it is. Once you're used to what the cal numbers are, you know, kind of the rule of thumb I tell everybody is if you're out more than 10% on a catch, on what the cal number, what you think the cal number should be, or what, something's wrong. Something's really wrong, because it's not out that far. If you ever are doing one out of the micro bin, I'll put all the dividers back in, because then it keeps everything kind of falling. And I have on occasion, if you ever end up doing cover crop radish or canola or something like that, I actually put a bit of cardboard on top here, because those little hard seeds hit there and bounce. So just to keep it all into the pail so you get a real accurate one. Because, you know, when you're talking 3-4 pounds per acre, it doesn't take very much to be out. So, chain maintenance. That chain, well, let me show you. Every other chain has got a weld on it, so or every other link. So when you need to break one, obviously you break one that's got the turnable. As chains stretch and wear, there's two things that occur. One is that where the pin goes through here, the holes start to waller out a little bit, they get elongated, right? And the other is that where the squares match up, start to pull a bit. So actually they'll start to almost V instead of being square. And what'll happen is, what you look for a chain is that there's some room on the pins. So now this is a new chain where the pins are here on the edge. It's tight. You'll get to the point where you'll get a gap like that. So basically the chain gets narrower and longer at the same time as it pulls. There will come a point, and you can, on these chains, you can probably break them and pull pieces out 3-4 times maybe. Like, it's quite a bit. And the top one, you'll go forever before you ever do a top chain, just because it's so short. The longer chains kind of wear faster. And if we, on a 9620 or an AB640, yeah, 20 footers, you know, they wear fast. Anyway, where I'm going with all that is that chains do wear, they do break in. And on day one, I will almost guarantee you're going to have to adjust that chain. That it'll break to the point that you need to. And on these ones, let's see if I can see what I'm looking for. See that chain living in the middle there between the top and the bottom? That's where it's supposed to be.
That's a lot nicer for adjusting.
Oh, is it ever? Yeah. 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 So the old ones, they used to, you had to pull the funnel out and you had to look at a tab and all that sort of stuff. And it just never got done. Nobody did it. And now on your daily walk around, if you show a customer that, they will look at that every day on, you know, I want that one greased, I want that one greased, and I want you to look at that every day. And like I said, day one, I'll guarantee you, if you're running any volume, that you have to adjust that. Day two, probably. Day three, maybe. I don't know. But after that, maybe weekly at the best. So once the chains break in, they last a long time. Make sure they're in between there. If they're maintained, they go a long, 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 long time. If you have to, there will come a point in time where the chain is stretched out so far that each cog on the drives, that your chain distance is longer than the cog, right? And then you're at the risk of it back wrapping. And that's what happens if you let that chain get too sloppy. It's not, what happens is that on the drive, so here you have your idler and your drive, the drive will actually back grab it and pull it backwards. And then it gets to be a really, really long day when it wraps back in there. It's bad. And 9 out of 10, you'll bugger up the chain too. You can, if you stretch the pieces, and you almost always do, cut a piece out and put a new piece in. We have that, and I'd recommend that you just keep a bit of chain out of one you pulled, you know, for whatever reason, kicking around to kind of patch stuff up if you need to. If you rechain one, the drives underneath there, take a look at the cogs on them. If you've let the chain go too far and it's back, and it's the distance on between the links is longer than the cogs, it'll have actually back cut on it. Yeah, it has a hook on it. If that has happened, that drive is hooped. Throw it away. In the parts book, it shows you the sprockets and all for that. Don't do it. Do it as a complete assembly. And the reason why is because in theory these things all come apart. In reality, you'll spend a half a day pounding, and then you'll have stuff that doesn't fit back in, and just replace it. It's so much easier. It's cheaper, faster, just more efficient by far. PWM right there, and here's your test port. So there's a whole series of test ports on these machines, and that includes the 200s and the 320s that allow you to plug in. So we can test pump pressures at pump, and then we can test here, and then we can test after on everything too. So if we're losing, we can figure out where it is. If you don't have, I assume that you have test kits to get onto that?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Be aware on that one. So let's talk about the fan on that one. So this one is a Query, right? So this one, 4,000 RPM. That's it. That's all you're going to get out of that one. That one is an S3 fan. Okay. That one's 48 or 5. It's just a different kind of fan. Air is no different than water. You have volume and you have pressures, right? And that one just gives you more pressure. This one actually gives you a little bit more volume, but not nearly as much pressure. So therefore they have to have more RPMs to basically do the same thing. That machine, basically the tunnel's 14 inches versus 16 inches. The fan is way, way bigger on that one versus this one. So capacity is quite a bit different. I'm doing this off the top of my head. I want to say these ones are 750 pounds of 60-pound product at 10 miles an hour, and those ones are either 1,100 or 1,200 pounds of 60-pound product at 10 miles an hour. So significantly more capacity, and what it all boils down to is oil. How much hydraulics do you got to give us? These ones, we max this one out. We max it right out on what it can do. Having said that, most of the stuff that's done in Ontario, the rates short of potatoes and vegetables, we're kind of there. Maybe you might get into a bit of corn that's really heavy, but the machine itself is almost the same. The Airbox is very, very similar. It's a little narrower, but all the design on it's all the same. All that's the same. Same with the sensors for the folding and all that sort of stuff. When you put auto boom on, in theory, you don't have an accumulator on. And the reason why is because the auto boom has to overcome the pressure of the accumulator, be able to pick up. And I knew we were playing with one somewhere where we put an accumulator on it, a slightly smaller version, to try and just even that out a little bit. There it is there. I knew I'd find it sooner or later.
Has that helped?
Yeah, it has actually. So the whole concept of the accumulator is to give that boom ride, so that when you're going down the field, everybody asks, how fast can I go? Well, when it starts to shake, slow her down. Basically, either you're going to override the fan that you're putting out where the fan can't keep up, or you're going to shake it, one or the other. So as long as you're not seeing the streams, keep going. And after that, start to look for a boom shake, and when you get boom shake, just pull her back a little bit. The accumulators make huge, huge difference on the amount of boom shake and how fast you can go. We did have some where the accumulators were slightly different left and right, and it kind of did some wonky things, but Michael talked to that as well, so there is a bulletin on tuning them up. They really, really, really do make a difference. We wanted better boom ride, because what was happening was on auto boom, you have to have it on. If you didn't have it on, you were going to shake her, because there's no protection in it, right? So we wanted to have the best of both worlds, so we were playing around with one that still could act fast enough, and kind of depends on the driver. The driver makes a big difference, and how you tune those things makes a big, big, big difference too.
Or the valve response rate?
Yeah. Makes a big difference. You almost tune them to the operator. Some operators are, slow and easy, and other ones are put her right down. So it all depends. What else can we talk about? And once again, the reason that we have accumulators on this one is because you can't put auto boom on them. They just don't have enough hydraulic capacity to do it, right? And I'm sure that day is going to change, that Deere's going to keep building them bigger and bigger and heavier and capable of more and more.